For 9 seasons, Last Man Standing carved out a strange and lasting place in American television. It was a family sitcom built around a man surrounded by women, a show that leaned hard into a conservative worldview at a time when most network comedies steered clear of politics altogether. But underneath the jokes about masculinity, outdoor gear, and generational culture clashes, the show was quietly one of the most turbulent productions on television. Actors came and went. Characters were rewritten overnight. A cancellation that seemed to come out of nowhere nearly killed the series entirely, only for a completely different network to bring it back from the dead. Fans who tuned in faithfully year after year watched familiar faces disappear and new ones take their place, often without much explanation. Some of those changes were about scheduling, some were about age and casting logic, and some, according to the people involved, may have had more to do with politics and money than anyone at the network wanted to admit. This is the story of what really happened behind the scenes of Last Man Standing, and why so many of the people who built that show ended up leaving it. By the time Last Man Standing premiered in the fall of 2011, Tim Allen had been away from a weekly network sitcom for more than a decade. His last major series, Home Improvement, had ended in 1999, and in the years since he had built a career mostly in film, with a few stops in animation thanks to the Toy Story franchise. Coming back to television wasn't something Allen rushed into. Reports at the time indicated he had passed on other opportunities to return to the small screen, including a lucrative offer from CBS that reportedly would have paid him around $1 million an episode. What eventually pulled him back was a project from writer and producer Jack Burdett, who pitched a character named Mike Baxter, a gruff, opinionated marketing executive at an outdoor sporting goods company who found himself constantly outnumbered by the women in his life. Allen has said in interviews that his first instinct was to turn the role down, worried it would feel too much like a retread of Tim Taylor, the character that made him famous on Home Improvement. He reportedly said no to the project multiple times before eventually agreeing, and part of what changed his mind was the deal structure. Along with starring in the show, Allen came on as an executive producer, giving him real influence over where the character and the series would go creatively. That control mattered later, especially as the show leaned further into political material that reflected Allen's own conservative views. ABC had ambitious plans for the series. Network executives reportedly envisioned something in the spirit of All in the Family, a show built around a strong-willed, old-fashioned patriarch whose opinions would be tested and challenged by the people closest to him. Rather than a house full of sons who might argue back and forth as equals, Mike Baxter's foil was his own household, a wife and 3 daughters who, for the most part, leaned more liberal than he did. It gave the show a built-in tension that other family sitcoms didn't have. ABC placed the series in the Friday 8 p.m. slot, historically one of the toughest time slots on network television because so many younger viewers are out of the house on Friday nights rather than watching live TV. The bet was that Allen's star power alone could draw an audience willing to defy that trend, and it worked. The premiere in October 2011 pulled in more than 13 million viewers, making it one of ABC's strongest comedy debuts in years. The show didn't just survive its tough times lot, it dominated it, particularly with viewers in the 18 to 49 demographic that advertisers cared about most. Over its 6 seasons on ABC, Last Man Standing consistently pulled in well over 8 million viewers per episode, numbers that made its eventual cancellation all the more surprising to fans and industry observers alike. Before any of that cancellation drama began, the show had already gone through its first major cast shakeup, and it happened almost immediately. Alexandra Krosny played Kristen Baxter in Season 1, the eldest of Mike and Vanessa's 3 daughters. Kristen was written as a young single mother, still a teenager when she had her son Boyd, working as a waitress and living back home with her parents while she tried to figure out her next steps in life. Krosny brought a scrappy, sarcastic energy to the role that many fans responded to, and her back-and-forth exchanges with Allen's character were among the more memorable dynamics of that first season. Despite that reception, ABC announced that Krosny would not be returning for Season 2. The official explanation given at the time was simply creative differences, a phrase vague enough to fuel plenty of speculation among fans. Behind the scenes, the reasoning appears to have been more layered than that single phrase suggests. According to reporting from entertainment outlets at the time, Incoming showrunner Tim Doyle wanted to shift Kristen's arc in a different direction, aging her up so that her storylines could carry more weight and give her more room to spar with Mike on political and social topics, rather than keeping her locked into the confused teen mom framing from season 1. There was also a more practical issue at play involving the show's casting. Kristen was written as the eldest Baxter daughter, but Krosny was actually younger than Molly Ephraim, who played the middle daughter Mandy. That mismatch reportedly bothered producers, since it undercut the believability of the family's birth order on screen. The decision was made to recast the role with Amanda Fuller, an actress a few years older than both Ephraim and Krosny, whose casting solved the age problem and, producers felt, brought a steadier, more grounded read to a young mother juggling a baby and a complicated ex-Fuller went on to play Kristen for the remainder of the series, all the way through the Fox revival years later. She has since spoken publicly about how difficult it was to step into a role that fans had already grown attached to, describing online backlash in the early days of her run and the pressure of trying to win over an audience that had strong opinions about who Kristen was supposed to be. Kristen wasn't the only character who went through an early transformation, and this next recast is one that still surprises people who don't realize how far Last Man Standing's cast churn actually went. In December 2011, during the show's first season, a then 19-year-old Nick Jonas made a guest appearance as Ryan Vogel's son, Kristen's ex-boyfriend, and the father of her baby, Boyd. The character arrived in a Christmas episode after having been absent from the family's life, portrayed as an immature, somewhat clueless young man who had run from the responsibility of fatherhood. It was a one-off appearance designed in part to bring some star power and pop culture buzz to the show, and it worked in that narrow sense, generating plenty of attention for the episode. But the character as written in that first appearance was never meant to be the final version of Ryan. When Tim Doyle took over as showrunner heading into Season 2, he reportedly wanted Ryan to evolve into something more substantial than a punchline about an absent, immature dad. The plan was to fold Ryan into the show as a recurring character with real ties to the Baxter family, someone who could grow alongside Boyd and eventually serve as another voice pushing back against Mike's political and social views. Jonas, who by that point was juggling other commitments, did not return in the role. In his place, the production brought in Jordan Masterson, an actor known at the time for his work on the sitcom Greek. Masterson's version of Ryan was a significant departure from the character Jonas had briefly played. He was written as sharper, more mature, and far more willing to challenge Mike directly on political and philosophical territory, giving the show another consistent counterpoint to Alan's conservative patriarch. Over the course of the series, Ryan's arc continued to expand well beyond where it started. What began as a storyline about a deadbeat dad eventually turned into Ryan running his own cannabis business under the name Best Buds, a plot development the writers used for some pointed comedy about Ryan unknowingly embracing capitalism, much to Mike's amusement. While Kristen and Ryan's recastings drew plenty of attention because they involved recognizable performers, the show also quietly swapped out the actor playing Kristen's son Boyd, and it did so more than once without generating nearly the same level of fan uproar. In the first season, Boyd was portrayed by twins Evan and Luke Crunchiff, a common practice for very young child roles that allows productions to comply with labor restrictions on how many hours a young performer can work in a single day. When the character was aged up as part of the broader retooling that brought in Amanda Fuller for Season 2, the production also cast a new actor, Flynn Morrison, who took over the role and played Boyd for the remainder of the show's run on ABC. When Fox revived the series years later, the production once again recast the role, this time with young actor Jet Juergensmeyer stepping in. Because none of these changes involved adult stars with existing fan bases or ongoing subplots that fans had grown emotionally attached to, the recastings barely registered as controversy compared to the reaction that greeted the swap from Krosny to Fuller. It's a reminder that not every cast change on the show was tied to some larger drama about politics or contracts. Sometimes it was simply the practical reality of working with child actors who grow up in real time while a television show tries to keep its internal timeline consistent. While the recastings of Kristen, Ryan, Mandy, and Boyd tend to dominate conversations about behind-the-scenes turnover, it's worth remembering how much stability the show's core adult supporting cast actually provided during a genuinely chaotic stretch of production history. Nancy Travis, who played Mike's wife Vanessa, stayed with the show from its very first episode through its series finale, anchoring the family dynamic even as three different actresses cycled through the daughter roles around her. Hector Elizondo, playing Mike's longtime friend and co-worker Ed Alzate, remained a fixture of the cast for the show's entire run as well, providing a consistent comedic voice even as the writer's room turned over and the show's ownership shifted from one studio relationship to another. Christoph Sanders, who played Mandy's on-again, off-again love interest and eventual husband Kyle Anderson, and Jonathan Adams, who played Mike's boss Ed Alzate's colleague at the outdoor sporting goods company, also stuck with the production through its move from ABC to Fox, giving the show a sense of continuity that helped smooth over the more jarring cast changes happening elsewhere in the ensemble. That continuity mattered enormously once the show made the jump to a new network. A multi-camera family sitcom depends heavily on the chemistry of its ensemble, and having several key adult performers willing to renegotiate their contracts in return for the Fox revival gave the production a foundation to build on while it sorted out replacements for Ephraim and worked around Devers' increasingly limited availability. It also meant that when the show finally did end in 2021, it did so with much of its original adult cast still in place, even if the daughters sitting around the Baxter dinner table looked different than they had a decade earlier. By the spring of 2017, Last Man Standing had built a genuinely loyal, sizable audience. It remained one of ABC's top-performing comedies, still pulling in well over 8 million viewers a week and holding steady in the ratings even in its sixth season. So when ABC announced in May 2017 that it was canceling the show outright, the decision blindsided almost everyone connected to it, including the cast. The news broke just a couple of months after Tim Allen had generated headlines for a comment he made on Jimmy Kimmel Live, comparing his experience as a conservative in Hollywood to living in a repressive political climate. That timing alone was enough to convince a large portion of the show's fanbase that politics had played a direct role in the cancellation. ABC's official explanation pointed elsewhere. Network president Channing Dungey stated in interviews and conference calls with reporters that the decision came down to scheduling and business strategy rather than ideology, explaining that the network had decided to move away from airing comedies on Friday nights in favor of other programming. There was also a significant financial dimension to the decision that rarely made headlines at the time. Last Man Standing was produced not by ABC itself, but by 20th Century Fox Television, which meant ABC had to pay a licensing fee for every episode it aired, reportedly in the range of a few $1,000,000 per episode. On top of that fee, Tim Allen's own salary was substantial, reportedly exceeding $200,000 per episode, making the show one of the more expensive comedies in ABC's lineup relative to its ownership stake in it. The contract between ABC and 20th Century Fox Television covering those costs had also run its course after 6 seasons, and taking on a 7th season would have required ABC to absorb significantly more of the production expense than it previously had. Whether or not politics factored into the network's internal calculus, the financial structure of the deal gave ABC a plainly practical reason to walk away. Whatever the true mixture of motives, the emotional fallout was immediate and visible. Tim Allen posted publicly that he felt stunned and blindsided by a network he had called home for years. Nancy Travis, who played his television wife Vanessa, spoke about how heartbroken she was over the loss of the show and thanked fans for their support. Hector Elizondo, who played Mike's co-worker and friend Ed, suggested in interviews that politics may have played some role in the network's thinking, even as ABC continued to deny that framing publicly. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker weighed in as well, publicly suggesting the cancellation looked politically motivated, which only added more fuel to an already heated conversation happening across social media. While some of the show's younger cast members quietly began looking toward other projects, assuming the cancellation was permanent, a large portion of the fan base refused to accept the decision. A petition calling on ABC to reverse the cancellation gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures within a remarkably short window, eventually climbing past the 400,000 mark and continuing to grow well beyond that in the following year. Fans flooded social media with the hashtag #SaveLastManStanding, generating an enormous volume of posts. Some supporters mailed toy tools to ABC's offices, a nod to Mike Baxter's outdoorsy, handyman-adjacent persona. Others crowd-funded billboard space in major cities including Los Angeles and New York, publicly pressuring the network to reconsider. Behind the public campaign, there was also a quieter business process playing out. Representatives from 20th Century Fox Television, which owned the show outright, began shopping Last Man Standing to other networks almost immediately after the cancellation, reportedly including conversations with the cable network CMT. Those talks ultimately stalled, in part because of the size of the budget required to keep a multi-camera sitcom like this one running. It wasn't until roughly a year after the cancellation that Fox's broadcast network itself stepped in. In May 2018, Fox announced it would revive the series for a seventh season. Industry observers noted that Fox's decision came shortly after ABC's own revival of Roseanne had performed extremely well in the ratings, demonstrating that there was still a hungry audience for older, politically tinged sitcoms featuring stars with outspoken personal views. Fox reportedly committed tens of millions of dollars to bringing the show back into production, a bet that the built-in fan base and name recognition would translate into strong ratings